Okay, class, welcome to Unit 3.2b. Again, relations, domain, and range. Okay, let's take a look at domain and range again, just to kind of review. Once again, this is one of those things where the more you work with it, the easier it gets. So these first three, let's take a look at your ordered pairs, your tables, and mapping. Before we get looking at that, just remember a few things. That relation is a set of ordered pairs. So all of those ordered pairs, tables, mapping is all different ways to represent these sets of pairs. We're going to be looking at our domain value being x values and our range value being y values. So if we're kind of looking at any one of these three, what we're really looking for is to make sure that your domain is your x values. So in an ordered pair, we're looking at like 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when we go to write them in our domain, remember we are writing them in that set notation. Put them in number order, put them from least to greatest, and don't repeat anything. So in that case, it's already kind of listed out pretty nicely for you. And when you're looking at your range, again, we're going to try to take a look at all of them, least to greatest with no repeats. So if we start at -1, and then we got 0, no zeros, we got 1, we got 2 3s, again, write that once, and 5. So right there we have our domain and range of those first set of points. So in example 2 here, we're going to look at a table, which are a little bit different here. And they kind of got our domain values a little bit mixed up. But let's take a look at reordering them from least to greatest. And it looks like we have a -2, we have a 2, and we have 2 3s. And when we look at our range values, which is our y values, we just need to get all of those values out one at a time. So we got a -1. Oh, actually, let's make that the -4. Didn't see that one. -1. And then we have 2 7s. Again, only writing each repeats one time. All right, so that's your domain and range out of a table. Now, lastly, when we start looking at domain and range of mapping, a lot of times we got our domain already kind of grouped out for you. And if they set this up right, we got -2, 0, 1, and 3. And if you're looking at your range, we're looking for our y values. So we got -3, 1, 3, and 4. Okay, take a few minutes to find the domain and range of each of these before we go on and check your work. Pause now before you continue on. Okay, take a minute to just double check your work and make sure you kind of listed those all out appropriately. Okay, let's take a look at a couple other examples. Now we're looking more out of our graphs. So let's take a look at finding domain and range of these. So when we look at this first table over here, which is a couple points, remember, domain is always our x value. So like, look at your graph, -1, -2, -3, -4, looks like -5. And I always work these dots left to right. That way we get them in order. So then we look at the second one, that looks like a -2. Our x value of that point would be 0. We look out here, that looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. So if we kind of go through them from left to right, we're going to already put them in order just like we, intend to do. Same thing as you're working down, working up your range values. Let's start at the bottom. All right, well, both of these points are -1, so we only have to write that one once. As we look up, that one looks like a +1. We got a 2, and we got a 3, 4. So again, just kind of looking through those points and working, pulling out those x and y values. But when we look at this next one, we have a big, long, continuous graph. So we can't just go through, and list out every point, because that's going to include all fractions, decimals, every value in between. So we could be here all day writing them, not to mention these arrows mean that they're going on forever. So when you look at your domain, and we are looking at our x values, so we are looking left to right and figuring out where this graph exists. Well, as you can trace through that thing, we have no spots in the graph where x does not exist. Left to right, it is continuous the whole way through. When we start looking at our range, and we're looking at our y values up and down, well, we can see that it is going to stop right here. It's all the way to infinity, comes down, stops, turns around, then goes back to positive infinity. Well, if we are looking right here, where did y stop? That looks like it stopped right on the 0, right on your origin. So we're basically saying that y can be anything greater than or equal to 0. And then we look at this third graph, and things get even a little bit trickier, because now we got some gaps. Well, if we look at our domain on our x value, it's everything over here, but then stops right here. So if we look at that -1, the first thing we can tell about our domain is it can be less than or equal to -1. The problem is it is not in between these two values. So we can come back and say, or it can end up being greater than, well, where did that go? 2 above 2. So that would be or greater than 2. So it's in both of them values. It could be less than 1, or it could be greater than 2. Nothing in between. Don't forget, open circle, no equal sign. If we look at our range and look at these values, looking at our y values, it looks like it kind of gets stuck here and is just going to end up going down. So at the highest point, there is a closed dot there. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4 up. So that's going to tell us that y has to be less than or equal to 4. And then that one's done. In our last graph, this is one that goes on x values all the way from positive to negative infinity. And also when you're looking at your y values, this is one that goes from positive to negative, covers your whole graph, never stops, never breaks, going to infinity in both directions. So both of those are going to include all real numbers. Okay, at this point, pause your slide here and take a minute to kind of practice through these problems before you go on and check your work. Okay, here's your first set of answers. Check through there, see if we have any questions. And lastly, working through these, check those last 3, see how we did. And at this point, that kind of wraps up our paper practice. There is an assignment in Alex for you to complete today, so make sure you don't forget to do that. All right, good luck. Have a nice day.